Hello and welcome to another episode of 15 Fury Focus on WANE 15 Plus. I am meteorologist Lance Huffman. Happy to have you here for this episode. This is being recorded on Wednesday, March 11th. It's been some crazy weather recently, and not too much time to really explain why a lot of this has been going on. And so for 15 Fury Focus, for some of you who might be new watching this, first of all, thank you for watching us on WANE 15 Plus. But for those who are curious, we basically spend about a half hour talking about the weather, and we go really in depth about it because there's a whole lot more that really goes into our atmosphere than just talking about one day's weather. We like to go into the past, to look at some things that have happened. For example, for this episode, and we'll talk about it later on, we're going to talk about the severe weather events that have been unfolding over the past 24 hours relative to this episode being recorded, again, on March 11th. That includes some tornadic activity off to our west, some potential tornadoes around the area, and even some high wind damage in some portions of northeast Indiana, and some flooding too. So it's been a lot as we kicked off March and meteorological spring so far, because we haven't yet to hit astronomical spring, which is not until we get towards the later parts of this month, but we have technically entered a meteorological spring for record-keeping purposes. Let's talk about the warmth to kick off this episode. It's been pretty warm recently. In fact, over the past 7 days, our high temperatures have either been in the 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s. And the closest we've been to in average high temperature is actually the following Wednesday, and that was 45 degrees. That was 1 degree, or at least on the average point of that point, which is likely either 45 degrees or now, which is 46 degrees. Our average high temperatures this month increase, which means that we can expect to see our high temperatures gradually increase in terms of warmth over a period of time. But it certainly felt more like May as we've gone throughout these past few days. We've hit 3 record high temperatures in the past 7 days. Just thinking about that, I hope a lot of you have enjoyed the warmth recently if you're a fan of the warmer weather. Becca is not here today, but I know that she is a huge fan of the warmer weather. I'm a fan of this kind of warmer weather, as long as it's not here for too long. I don't mind myself some of that warm weather this time of year, but typically whenever we see this, sometimes it can also bring us some windy or breezy moments with them too. Some of them, Monday and I believe Friday, both of those were accompanied by some sunshine. Our Tuesday high temperature was 75 degrees for the March 10th, 72 Monday for March 9th. Both of those days hit record high temperatures. Monday was 67 degrees, set back in 2016, and then Tuesday was 75 degrees, and that shattered the other record there, which was 72 degrees, set back in 1925. So back-to-back record high temperature days. And for March 11th, which is Wednesday, so we'll call it for this episode, which is when it's being recorded again, 70 degrees was the high temperature, and that actually occurred in the morning. That occurred relatively early in the morning because we didn't see a cold front move through quite yet. And then once that cold front moved, our temperatures dropped into the 30s by the time we got towards our 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. shows. So by the time you likely were seeing the news, maybe later on Wednesday afternoon and evening, we saw a dramatic change in those temperatures thanks to that cold front and some windy moments. And of course, some showers and storms too. Friday also beat a record high temperature because that one was either, I believe, in the lower 70s, the older record high temperature then, and we really broke that one with 76 degrees then. And so let's look at our monthly temperatures so far. All of these reds indicate the average high temperatures of the day, whether or not they're below or average, or above average. And the reds are above average, the blues are below average. We've not had an average day so far. We've either had below average, which is the first 3 days to kick off March, and then since March 4th and everything since that, it's been above average. And looks like it's going to stay that way throughout a few more days in the 10-day forecast. But there are some hints of a little bit of some cooler weather in some instances, especially for St. Patrick's Day. We'll talk about why that is here in just a second. Departure from averages. This has been super, super interesting to look at because you can tell which days are really the record high temperature days. We can see that there on March 5th. March 9th, and March 10th. All of those days have their average temperatures, their high temperatures well above 25 degrees or more. And some of those 32 there on the 5th, it looks like, the 6th, 32 degrees there on March 6th, and then 30 degrees there on March 10th. Those were how high our high temperatures were above average, which is around 45 to 46 degrees. So as you can imagine, that's how we got some of those 70s. Thanks to some warm fronts, some very windy moments, that guided us to those record warm temperatures. 72 degrees again on March 9th. As you can see, those previous records there were shattered as we've gone through these past couple of days. Now, this is going to change, though, and here's why it's going to change. On our Futurecast jet stream, our record high temperatures, they'll likely be safe. You won't be seeing that high temperature yesterday, which was 73. I might have said 72 earlier, but just to clarify, that was 73 degrees set back in 1925. Our jet stream is indicating we're going to see it move farther south. This is a Futurecast model of it, so we'll see exactly where it lines up, but it looks like later on this week, we're going to see that take a big dip, especially this weekend. We'll see a few moments of some 40s and 50s, but take a look at how this jet stream changes as we get towards Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. Highs will be pretty mild and fairly warm on Sunday, but the jet stream is going to move well south. You see all those pinks on your screen in parts of the northern United States. Well, that's going to surge southward, and that's going to give us a huge blast of cold air relative to this time of year. We're not looking at a huge Arctic blast like what we would see in January and February, but that means we could see high temperatures in the 20s, maybe 30s, as we kick off the following work week, and that does include St. Patrick's Day for those who might be at the Clover Classic or Deer Park Irish Pub. You'll definitely want to bundle up like it is winter, because we are still technically in a astronomical winter, so I guess it is still fitting, but this could perhaps be winter's last gasp. Take a look at what happens really around the 10-day time frame from here. Next weekend, so the following weekend from this weekend, there's what we call a high-pressure ridge in the upper levels of our atmosphere that may actually build in. And what happens with this is it means that we might see a more mild pattern, and it's a pattern that generally favors more quiet weather. We don't see as many low pressures moving at that point. So in our 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, as of now, we still are favored for those below average temperatures while we see the jet stream to our south. But as it surges northward and we see that high pressure ridge form around us, we're going to see likely a return to maybe some more mild weather in the pattern. Now, for the time being, we're going to see some below average precipitation because of this pattern that returns to some of this slightly more mild weather at some times, or even that colder weather as we start into this upcoming week. So for our March outlook, for our average high temperature to start the year, to start the month of March 1st, 41 degrees, we're more closer for our high temperatures recently to really finish off the month than what we were to really closer to the month, because we're getting closer to the midpoints of the month, so our heights are really kind of in between there. But our highs recently, again, we'll show the past 7 days once more. Our past 7 days have seen high temperatures that are more May-like. In fact, it's more mid to late May-like for some of these average high temperatures. That's just how warm it's been recently. Whenever we see this warmth this time of year, it has been a recipe for showers and storms. Some of them have been strong, some of them have been severe, and that's going to be our focus on our 15 Fury Focus episode. That was an unintended dad joke here. I love dad jokes. All right. Let's bring you back on in here and talk about our severe weather situation that not only we saw on March 11th, but some of us west of Fort Wayne and really west of Northeast Indiana experienced on March 10th. We saw a long track supercell thunderstorm that not only brought very, very large hail to Illinois, but also some strong, possibly intense tornadoes into Northwest Indiana. You likely saw this in the news at some point. Let's take a look at a loop on our Live Doppler 15 Fury storm tracker, it has certainly been some pretty miserable moments for our Wednesday after a cold front's moved through. There's a look at that supercell that we're going to take a deep dive into. That has been a culprit for some major damage into parts of whether it's Illinois. As you can see there on the kind of recent loops, it's moved through near Kankakee. Pardon me if I mispronounced that. But as it even moved through northeast Illinois, it tracked into northwest Indiana. And those purple polygons that you see there, those are still tornado warnings. But as it progressed into northwest Indiana, those pink warnings, those were warnings that are an upgraded warning. We're going to talk about warning upgrades. We're going to talk about how the storm is able to really thrive and some of the damage it produced. Let's start off with some of the impacts that it's been able to really have in some portions of the area here as well. So I have this written down. We have an article up on WANE.com to really check this out, but this is from the Associated Press here. Let's see. Several intense supercell thunderstorms. So these are thunderstorms that have rotating updrafts. And if they have rotating updrafts and they're able to feed into an environment that is unstable, it can sometimes be a recipe for very large hail, sometimes tornadoes and damaging winds. There was one specifically that this is the one that we're talking about. It moved over northern Illinois and into northwestern Indiana on Tuesday. Mainly specifically Tuesday afternoon, evening, and into the overnight hours, especially as it got into northwest Indiana. It shattered windows, especially with hail and flying debris from tornadoes. It tore off roofs, it smashed vehicles, and especially the tornadic damage, it really damaged some areas. There's an area called Lake Village. This is in far northwestern Indiana. This is actually where we see the time zone change to central time. And when that happens, it's pretty interesting because that's where the Chicago metro actually kind of is considered. That's kind of why they have that central daylight time change over there. But let's see if I can zoom in here. Yes, I'm going to bring you back here and show you what Storm Tracker was showing actually when we get towards when it was moving through. So you can kind of see that timestamp there. It looks like around 8:17 p.m. That was starting to move through Lake Village or was already moving through Lake Village. And that polygon there indicated that there was a likely large and extremely dangerous tornado moving through Lake Village. And this was just east of the Illinois-Indiana state line. You can see some of those other communities there. Roselawn, Wheatfield, those were also some communities that were heavily impacted by this tornado, or at least multiple tornadoes that likely touched down. So for context there, Lake Village, you can find that about 60 miles southeast of Chicago and 20 miles west of Kankakee County, Illinois. And that was one of the cities that also saw some very large hail. This is where one of those tornadoes touched down. For kind of residents in Lake Village, they have a tornado siren, but not all tornado sirens were issued at that point. To quote them, they wrote it out in their downstairs bathtub. They were unscathed. So that's how important it is for folks to make sure to really get to the lowest level of an interior room. Whenever, even if it may sound like it's not a big deal whenever there's a tornado warning issued, don't underestimate a tornado, because whether it's an EF0 or an EF4, even in EF5, they can be extremely dangerous here as well. And there were some indications with these tornadoes as they were touching down into northwest Indiana that some of them were likely EF2, potentially higher. We'll look at those here in just a little bit in terms of the scale potential that they have. Now, in northeast Indiana, we also had some impacts, not specifically from the supercell thunderstorm as well. But let's get back to this thunderstorm as it was pretty much traversing through northwest Indiana. As it traversed through northwest Indiana after sundown, you continue to see those pink polygons. That meant that there was a large, extremely dangerous tornado on the ground. Now, you see that purple polygon there. That is a tornado emergency. A tornado emergency is the highest level of a tornado warning that you can have. It means that there is a significant potential of there being a threat to life and property from a tornado that is on the ground, and is often issued whenever there is a high population area that could be impacted severely at any point. You can see that happened at around 9:40 Tuesday night. And we rarely see those. I think this might be one of the very, very, very few times the National Weather Service in North Webster has had to do that, aka National Weather Service, Northern Indiana. One of the very few times they've had to do this. But again, when you consider that this is a supercell thunderstorm that's been going on for literal hours and going on for multiple counties, whether it's from Northeast Illinois into Northwest Indiana, it's been a long track supercell, produced multiple tornadoes, and that specific one that produced that purple polygon, that tornado emergency, it certainly warranted it. Thankfully, and I mean thankfully, after talking with some meteorologists in the South Bend viewing market area, which includes, I believe that's Stark County, that has Knox in it, which is the kind of the center of Stark County here. It lifted before it pretty much got into Knox, or at least the worst of the damage was west of Knox. Of course, it still caused the damage to a lot of aerial homes, potentially, and some structures and some barns. But the largest impacts look to at least have stayed away from really being the worst in Knox. Now, as the supercell ended up traversing outside of really Knox there, you can see it started to weaken. On Tuesday night, I was here along with our chief meteorologist, Nicholas Ferrari. We were keeping a very close eye on this storm because you can see how for a while it was just tracking east. It was just tracking kind of east to northeast. And so as you can imagine, that track was ending up kind of getting close to being in northern Kosciuszko at some point, maybe Noble County, maybe LaGrange County. We did have a tornado watch that was in effect for Kosciuszko and LaGrange counties because of this alone supercell thunderstorm. There was that potential, but because this supercell thunderstorm produced likely such an intense tornado, when that tornado emergency was issued, when we noticed that there was likely a very intense tornado ongoing, this thunderstorm pretty much gave it all it got when it produced that final likely tornado in Stark County. It pretty much discombobulated, it became discombobulated. It just was not really organized well at that point. So it's really started to move northeast. And as it moved northeast, it really lost its specific, really tornadic traits. And it mainly just became a hail producer. And then it really started to dissipate once we got towards the Indiana and Michigan state line. Thankfully, it did not bring many impacts to Northeast Indiana. Now, really leading up to this event, we were looking at that as a concerning scenario, especially when I was working Tuesday morning on First News. It looked like it was a possible and really even a plausible scenario for this to happen, and it looked like that was going to unfold here for a little bit. But very rarely do you see a thunderstorm do so well, produce a tornado so strong that it actually loses itself instead of the atmospheric dynamics just not being conducive for it to hang on, because the atmosphere was primed for this supercell to go into far northern or northeastern Indiana. That was the case. It was very conducive for this to still be potentially tornadic into Kosciuszko, Noble, and Grange counties. But again, it pretty much it breathed out so much that it wasn't able to breathe in much anymore. And so really got disorganized, and it just continued to fall apart at that point as well. So as you can see, kind of on the broad view of Storm Tracker, that system fired off into the evening hours, and it really got that momentum because there was a lot of wind shear, a lot of instability, and a lot of moisture present into the atmosphere. And even then, there were showers and storms that flowed in behind that system that we did end up seeing in northern Indiana later on into the night. Let's take a look at this. This is what we call a hail tracker. And This is also pretty good to check out in this instance because you can kind of see when the storm was kind of near its prime. And then when it really lost some of that hail core, it would eventually start to weaken out when it got towards South Bend. So you can kind of see near Kankakee. Again, I apologize if I'm really butchering that name here as well, but hopefully I am not. But as you can see, those dark pinks, that's something you very rarely see, especially early March around here, because usually we see low instability, high shear environments, and those usually are not conducive for very large hail events. Folks, this was hail that gave, I want to say, 6-inch in diameter hail. This caused pretty significant damage in some of the cities that you see on your map now with some of that very, very large hail. Again, you don't just need a tornado for a supercell thunderstorm to be dangerous, because again, if you imagine quarter-sized hail, sometimes that can crack windows. So if you imagine 6-inch diameter hail, which if this gets confirmed as some of that hail, some of the hail could be even larger than that from some of the pictures that have been showing up on social media. This storm might set a new state record in Illinois for some of the hail it produced, which is pretty insane to think about. But kind of back to this situation, this can easily shatter windows, windshields on cars. This can easily dent cars. It can cause a lot of damage to some roofs. So as it continued to traverse into northwest Indiana, it lost to some of that hail core, but it was still able to produce that tornado pretty much into Stark County. But as it got into South Bend, you can see that hail core pretty much dissipated. That's how you can really tell that the storm really collapsed in and on itself after it produced that final tornado kind of near Knox in Stark County. So we are very grateful that we ourselves did not have to deal with this storm, but all the pictures coming out of, say, Lake Village and areas in northwest Indiana, Wheatfield, Indiana, that is very concerning to see, and we have our deepest thoughts with a lot of those folks who have been impacted from this tornado. Now, in terms of our impacts that we've seen here, we didn't see that storm, but we also were talking about a second round of storms that were likely to be moving through as well. Let's put that in some motion here on our storm tracker because it was certainly some crazy times that we saw as well. Let me speed this up for us let's do medium speed, and then let's show this here for you. Over the past 24 hours, we did see that supercell fire up, and then we saw that cold front move its way through. So again, this is being recorded Wednesday evening. You can see that supercell there, and you can see storm trackers trying to load a lot of this in because it's just been such a dynamic 24 hours on this radar loop on storm tracker. Yes, for folks who are curious, that is actually snow that's popped up behind that. But after that supercell dissipated, there was a line of showers and storms that popped up and moved eastward, mainly north of Fort Wayne. That brought some very heavy rainfall into some portions of the area. And in fact, areas such as Cromwell received up to 3 inches of rainfall. Some areas near Kendallville, Ligonier, Albion, areas near on the southern side of LaGrange County, even on the northern sides, and also counting Steuben and DeKalb counties. Some spots got up to 6 inches of rain, and that likely includes the additional rain that we saw flow in behind this, really not becoming more scattered until we got towards Wednesday afternoon and into the evening, with only light rain into the area at that point. Now, this has brought some flooding concerns, and I do believe from what I read on a lot of some things, it's actually caused some delays to areas such like Central Noble schools that caused delays. So with the National Weather Service saying, turn around, don't drown, there was some certainly significant flooding that took place in some portions of the area here as well. With that system, it was certainly pretty impactful. So while we have this in mind, I'm going to share with you some flooding safety tips here. Turn around, don't drown. You don't really want to underestimate how deep some water can be on roadways. It only takes a couple inches for a human to be able to be swept under flowing water. And that's pretty significant. Avoid low-lying areas. Avoid entering floodwaters because of that reason. and you want to monitor the latest forecast, because if there's just more chances for rain, that's not good at all. Let's take a look at some of the rainfall since midnight. You can see Fort Wayne recorded since midnight, and we'll see if this changes since it's being recorded Wednesday evening, but it shouldn't change too much. Over a half inch of rain being reported at the Fort Wayne airport since midnight, which should be pretty fairly accurate. I know some areas south of Fort Wayne have also received over an inch of rainfall. Marion likely to reach that inch of rainfall by things when they're all said and done. Areas Bluffton, Decatur, seeing some of those higher amounts there too. And this does not include those higher amounts that occurred north of Fort Wayne that have those rainfall reports of them being 3 inches or more at points. And we're going to show the loop on Storm Tracker again, because this overlays the drought monitor. There is some good news in terms of all of this heavy rain that we're seeing recently. And you see the drought monitor underlaying some of the storm tracker here. And we did see a tornado warning. I also want to add in Jay County earlier this morning from a brief area of rotation that could have caused damage in some areas. So National Weather Service is also looking into Wells County and Jay County here. We'll have a little bit of an aside here for just a second. We'll get back to why a lot of this rain is going to be beneficial for us. Wells County Emergency Management Agency is investigating a possible tornado touchdown that occurred near County Road 350 South and 600 East. So this is east of Bluffton. And a barn was destroyed. No injuries were reported, thankfully. This touchdown or possible touchdown occurred at around 7:30 this morning. There was also reports of Jay County where a barn was damaged a little later on into the morning as a tornado warning was actually issued as of that point. Let's see if we can get lucky on Storm Tracker and maybe be able to show that warning here for some of us folks here. But some river flood warnings are also in effect because of all the heavy rain that we're seeing here as well. All right, let's take a look at the drought monitor here situation. I almost forgot. I did not forget, folks. We're going to take a look at the drought monitor overlaying with Storm Tracker because a lot of us have still been dealing with some extreme drought. That's the area in the red there. All the rain that we've seen today, a lot of us seeing over an inch of rainfall, could see some good changes to drought monitor. We're not going to see those changes this week because whenever we see the drought monitor have data in, it's data that finishes by Tuesday morning. So this is not going to include data when the new drought monitor is released tomorrow. It's not going to include the data of the rainfall that we saw yesterday. So the drought monitor, I don't expect to see too many changes as we see that release for Thursday, March 12th. We'll revisit this here in next week's episode of 15 Fury Focus as well. Let's break down some St. Patrick's Day history, and that's how we'll wrap up our 15 Fury Focus episode here as well. So for some St. Patrick's Day weather history around here, some have been luck of the Irish, some have been bad luck of the Irish. On March 17th, some interesting history facts in the weather world at least. The first severe weather watch, whether it was a tornado watch or a severe thunderstorm watch, or if they had a different wording at that point, was issued by the National Weather Service. On 1973, on March 17th, around a foot of snow fell on northern Indiana, and that included 12.5 inches of Fort Wayne snow, and that was from the 16th into the 17th. With that, Fort Wayne's second highest crest on the Maumee River occurred on this date for St. Patrick's Day, the 17th, in 1982, 25.9 feet, and that likely caused some areas of flooding. Again, this is typical for this kind of year, or for this time of year, for flooding to be possible, especially since a lot of our historic floods have occurred in March. And in 1998, the new Indiana National Weather Service office opened. So, St. Patrick's Day has some interesting weather history around here. Well, folks, it looks like we're about to wrap up our episode of 15 Fury Focus on WANE 15 Plus. Thank you for joining us once again. I'm meteorologist Lance Huffman. Have a great one and stay safe.